Why is everyone sleeping on Tre Harris this year?
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Rebel Nation. I'm Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we dive into Lane Kiffin's latest revelation. Tre Harris is the most improved player on the team. We all remember how dominant Tre was in 2023, especially in those one-on-one matchups where PFF rated him as one of the top wide receivers against single coverage. If he has improved as much as Kiffin suggests, we could be into for a truly historic season in 2024. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy, even Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn. They provide other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and even Ole Miss. So check it out. You know how I feel about perspectives. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, these sports stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Tre Harris is one of the better wide receivers in all of college football. Everybody, if you open any magazine and preseason ratings, you will find him ranked in the top 5 in college football. So why is everybody sleeping on Tre Harris? Well, as the season gets closer, everybody's kind of starting to hedge their bet and trying to be the smartest person in the room, to where PFF listed a top 10 players at the wide receiver position and left Tre Harris completely off of it. This is despite, in their own rankings, they ranked Tre Harris as the best wide receiver against single coverage in 2023. It's at the point where if Tre Harris would have stayed healthy the full year in 2023, it would have been a truly special year for Tre Harris, and we would be having different conversations about him right now. Last season, as it was, in roughly 9 games of competition, he had 54 catches, 985 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That was despite getting injured on the first series against Tulane and being out basically the subsequent 2 weeks after that. So basically in 9 games in the regular season, he racked up 54 catches, 985 yards, 8 touchdowns. If he would have played the full 12-game season, he would probably have ended up somewhere near 70 receptions on the year. He would have had about 1,200 yards on the year, and he would have had 8 to 12 touchdowns on the year. And also, Ole Miss would have beaten Alabama. If everybody remembers in that game, Ole Miss was without Tre Harris, essentially, and Caden Prieskorn was playing his first game back, and he wasn't completely healthy at that point. He wasn't the Caden Prieskorn that we saw at the end of the season. Ole Miss wins that game, if you remember how it goes in the first half and what was going on, if Tre Harris plays. Jordan Watkins, great receiver. Dayton Wade, great receiver. It's a situation going against big physical cornerbacks. Both of those can get physicaled up a little bit. But in 2024, if Tre Harris has improved to the level that Lane Kiffin's talking about, what does that mean? And if you've listened to my show over the last, 6 months, I've told you, Lane Kiffin and everything he's done this offseason has had one single purpose: to keep other teams from being able to double cover Tre Harris, to get single coverage as much as possible. And with helmet communication, that means they are going to be able to let teams know, let Jackson Dart know if he has single and double coverage, because Ole Miss snaps the ball before 15 seconds anyway. Now, sometimes they slow it down, but that is intentional. If Ole Miss is running their offense, they pretty much snap at around 21, 22 seconds on the play clock. So all of that lets you know that Tre Harris could be in for a special next level Marquise Lee, Amari Cooper type season for Ole Miss this year, even with having a Juice Wells, even with having a Jordan Watkins, even with having a Deion Smith and the young guys coming up and Aiden Williams and Caden Lee and those guys, Real White. Tre Harris might be on the verge of doing something in Ole Miss history that's special. Everybody at Ole Miss right now puts A.J. Brown at the top of the Mount Rushmore of greatest wide receivers to ever play at Ole Miss. Because of what he did in 2017 and 2018, what he was able to put together was pretty next level. Tre Harris nearly put up 1,000 yards in his junior season. If he puts up 14, 15, 1,600 yards in his senior season, it'll look completely different. And I think Lane Kiffin sees what is about to happen with Tre Harris. Now, it wasn't just Tre Harris that took this leadership and this hunger over to get better, because if you talk to Tre Harris, his eyes kind of lit up talking about going against Tre Harris. And Tre Harris is getting better going against Trey Amos. He is one of the better man coverage cornerbacks in the entire Southeastern Conference. That is the reason those matchups happen. And one-on-one matchups for Trey Amos to get better, going against Tre Harris is the way. It is definitely an iron sharpens iron type deal. And the hunger in Tre Harris. When he was at SEC Media Days talking to everybody, he was like, hey, everybody says we're going to be pretty good, but I just need to run better routes. I need to do this better. And the hunger was absolutely there. And all of these things being put together points to an Ole Miss team, an Ole Miss offense that is potentially next level, and potentially the best player on that offense being a person that acts like he's like the sixth best player on that offense, that he wants to get into that top three. Tre Harris having this mindset is going to make everybody that's trying to look like the smartest person in the room and downgrading this wide receiver, potentially because of the other wide receivers that Ole Miss could have, he's going to make them look foolish in relatively short order. Now, I'm not denigrating Evan Stewart in Oregon. I'm not denigrating any of the wide receivers at Ohio State. They're all good players. I just think the best wide receiver in the whole country resides at Ole Miss, and his name is Tre Harris. And at practice afterwards yesterday, Caden Lee was in the press conference who said, I think this is the best wide receiver room in all of college football because of what we can do. And I've been saying this for weeks about what the Ole Miss wide receiver room could be. So the question, if after knowing all of this stuff, why is everybody all of a sudden trying to sleep on Tre Harris and how good of a player he could be? When you look at Jackson Dart, a year ago, 233 for 358, 3,364 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. The reason the touchdown numbers were so low was because they didn't have a physical target to prevent double coverage in the red zone to Tre Harris. Because without that, if Ole Miss had that, Caden Priest corner, Deion Smith, or Juice Wells, anybody like that, that touchdown number would have probably been up towards 30, and Tre Harris would have had 15 wide receiver touchdowns over the course of the season. I think that everybody needs to realize and come to grips with the fact that Tre Harris is potentially something that Ole Miss hasn't necessarily ever seen. And I compare him to having a Dante Moncrief or a Laquan Treadwell fully healthy at the peak of their powers is what Tre Harris has the potential to do in 2024. Tre Harris has an unbelievable catch radius, even more so than A.J. Brown did. A.J. Brown's run after catch was next level. He was almost a slot wide receiver in that field long go offense more than an outside guy. So I'm going to compare Tre Harris to Dante Moncrief, to Laquan Treadwell. And he is also going to teach players like Aiden Williams. He's going to teach players like Caden Lee and Nareel White and potentially a Caleb Cunningham if he decides to come later on down the road. The ropes of playing wide receiver at Ole Miss, and he is what an outside wide receiver can look like, no matter what you think, trying to be the smartest person in the room as the season approaches. Coming up next, Ole Miss just secured their highest AP ranking since 1970. They landed at number 6. I've got some thoughts on what this means for the Rebels and how they can keep the momentum going. Don't miss it. You know, I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing the way we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep these sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I want and anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. You know, maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss's over-under and wins at 90.5, or maybe I want to bet on Ole Miss to win the national title at plus 1,500, or Jackson Dart at the Heisman Trophy at plus 1,500. That's right. There's something for everyone all day, all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for this exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on all the upcoming games and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. College football, Locked On College Football is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You know, it's really interesting that yesterday the preseason AP poll came out, and Ole Miss came out at number 6 in this poll. This is what it looks like. Number 6. That is the best ranking that Ole Miss has gotten in the AP poll in the preseason since 1970. And we all know what happened in 1970, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. But looking at this list, I think it was Brett Murtry that put out the thing that said every one of the national championship winners since 2004, except 2, have happened to be in the top 7 of the AP poll. And Ole Miss is coming in at number 6, which means, according to Brett McMurtry and everybody else, Ole Miss has a real chance to win the national title this year. Will they? I do not know. If you look at this, in 1970, that was Archie's senior year at Ole Miss. Johnny Vaught's last season at Ole Miss, full season as well. And if you look at that and think about that, that was the year that Archie broke his arm. That was the year that he was supposed to win the Heisman Trophy. Ole Miss was supposed to win the national championship. Archie who? The only year synonymous, essentially, in the last 60 years or something like that to what we are seeing right now was 1970. All of the excitement was absolutely palpable. You had a senior, third-year quarterback, the whole 9 yards. There was a lot of similarities between that team and this team. That team went on about their business and did a lot of stuff, and against Houston, Archie broke his arm on the field. They got blown out by LSU. They lost to Southern Miss. It ended up being a very disappointed season to the point where I'm talking about Archie breaking his arm, and that was 6 years before I was alive. So we all know that seasons can take a drastic left turn. And this season could as well, you know, knock on wood. I don't think it was going to happen, but the gods, the football gods, kind of owes Ole Miss after 1970. And Ole Miss getting that rank is something at least interesting. Now, if you look at the rest of the AP Top 25 poll, it starts out with Georgia. They are only the 3rd team to start off as the preseason number 1 team in a season in history or something like that. Ohio State's on up there as well. Oregon's up there as well. Texas, even though they just lost their running back, I don't know if they would be that high if everybody had more time with it. But Baxter tearing up his knee a couple of days ago, that is at least notable. Alabama, I think the numbers on the side of the helmet helps them out there. I would put Ole Miss over Alabama. Ole Miss is number 6. Notre Dame at 7, Penn State at 8, Michigan at 9, FSU at 10, Missouri at 11, Utah at 12, LSU at 13, Clemson at 14, Tennessee at 15, OU at 16, Oklahoma State at 17, and Kansas State at 18, Miami at 19, Texas A&M at 20, Arizona at 21, Kansas at 22, SC at 23, North Carolina State at 24, and Iowa at 25. That is the way the AP poll looks. Like I said, football seasons are unpredictable by design. We all know about playing games on paper, which, hey, I get 7 months out of content playing games on paper. But in the season, weird things can happen. And that is a reminder. This is the best ranking since 1970. And in 1970, we all know what happens. We all know what happened in that year. So that is going to keep the hunger of these players very much alive. We talked about the hunger of Tre Harris in the first segment. We have all seen the hunger of Jackson Dart. And if you look at the players on the roster of what's going on, the Juice Wells, who has a chance to really, really help out Tre Harris this year. Micah Davis, who Lane Kiffin talked about in his press conference today, and Zach Mareth, when he was doing the practice report last night, talked about what he did. He played on the inside and on the outside and offered a lot of good stuff. And we all saw the video a couple of days of Caden Prieskorn one-handing a ball. And Daquan Wright was listed as a Mackey Award watch list player, the second on Ole Miss's team, which means 12 personnel could be coming down the pike, just so everybody knows. The wide receiver room, though, is so good, I don't know if that's going to be possible. But 12 personnel, that is the thing that everybody is going to wonder about as this goes. But before I close out this subject, Ole Miss is highly ranked, the highest ranked it's been in my lifetime in the AP poll, number 6 in the country. They were number 5 in the country in 1970, the year that Archie broke his arm, on the turf at Vaught Hemingway Stadium against the Houston Cougars. That correlation should keep everybody and give everybody pause about what could happen during a football season. Now, am I going to talk about that? No, not much at all. There's some people that are very doom and gloom fans, and that is okay. That is the way they enjoy sports. I am the type of person, be excited, be hopeful, and treat other fans like adults instead of trying to temper expectations. I think expectations are a good thing. I think you can't do it unless you can dream it. Unless you can see it, you can't do it because you don't know what it looks like. So you have to do it. You have to have those high expectations. You have to act like that, even though that something bad could happen. It happens to everybody. Everybody has a moment to where they just get bit. Every team has that. But Ole Miss coming in at number 6 in the AP poll, and leading into a non-conference schedule to where Ole Miss could be 6-0 and second or third in the country by the time Ole Miss gets to LSU, the way this looks. Now, the thing I want to talk about, 12 personnel real quick. 12 personnel. Ole Miss has 2 tight ends that are John Mackey Award watch list members, and Daquan Wright and Caden Prieskorn. Ole Miss has 2 really good tight ends. Now, we talked about Jordan Rogers, about how he is expecting Ole Miss to run 5 wide receivers a lot this season. And I tell people every day on this podcast when I bring this up, that doesn't mean empty personnel to where you have 5 wide receivers on the field. Ole Miss could be 12 personnel. They could be 11 personnel in an empty set. It's all about tempo. And there's going to be a lot of times that Ole Miss does 12 and 11 personnel. I think 12 personnel in the red zone is almost a done deal at this point, but we will see how it goes. I think that in 12 personnel, this offense could be unlocked, especially whenever you have receiving threats in Daquan Wright and Caden Prieskorn to help out a Tre Harris, to where you could see Jackson Dart. I'll just bring this up again. 23 touchdowns a year ago. I think you could see that number 30, 35, 40 touchdowns in the course of this season because of what you can do to take pressure off of Tre Harris, to get single coverage with Daquan Wright, with Caden Prieskorn, potentially Deion Smith or Jordan Watkins or Juice Wells happening up on the wide receiver position. Should be quite interesting type stuff. Should be pretty cool. Anyway, coming up next on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the Rebs might be close to locking down their running back of the future. Could this be the game changer we've been waiting for? We'll talk about that in just a second, so stick around to find out. You know, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customer. So we play the RPM and crystal ball games all the time, man, because they can be relevant. They also can be fanboyish, both of which can be fun and both of which I will talk about. But today we're going to talk about them kind of being real, and it's time to start paying attention. And Shakai Mills-Knight, the running back out of the Baylor school in Chattanooga, was RPM to Ole Miss by Steve Wiltfong. And you know how I feel about the crystal balls and the RPMs. If you want to really pay attention to what is going on, pay attention to the national level recruiting guys to see where you think they're going to go. Now, if you look at the highlights of Shakai Mills-Knight, he is a really good running back. And we all saw that piece of paper a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, even before a Kylan Deere decommitted, that Shakai Mills-Knight was listed as the number one running back on Ole Miss's board. And he is a big-time back. Now, when you look at Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin, they have a type when it comes to running backs. They have excellent feet, everyone. They can make quick lateral movements, and they are really good at making a full-on contact into a glancing blow into a missed tackle, and a missed tackle into a touchdown. That is just what the style is with Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin's running back. And Shakai Mills-Knight, we had Brian Smith on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he's the Locked On recruiting expert, and he compared Shakai Mills-Knight favorably to Quinshon Judkins. He is a big, powerful running back. In high school, he has next-level talent and speed, and if he continues to develop his trade, he has a chance to be really good, a really good back. And Baylor plays in the private school classification in Tennessee, and what people need to know, a lot of people in Mississippi, when they think of private schools, they think of MAIS, to where Jackson Prep or MRIA are kind of the dominant forces in private school football, but this isn't the case. Private school football in Tennessee is probably synonymous to 7A level football in Mississippi, especially if you're a 3A private school in Tennessee. And Baylor School is a boarding school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They're in there with Macaulay, MBA, Innsworth, Brentwood Academy. Over in Memphis, I think MUS is a member of that as well. And because of that, they recruit. And they recruit at a very high level, honestly, for their school, to the point where a buddy of mine, I'm not going to mention his name, he was sent whenever he coached at a high school in Middle Tennessee, one of those private schools, to go out and scout 7th and 8th graders for their high school program. That's what he did. On Tuesday and Wednesday, they were going to junior high games so they can see whether or not they wanted to recruit the players to come to their high school private schools. And eventually those private schools, the best of the best, end up in Power 4 colleges and universities. Shakai Mills-Knight is a very good player. He is actually originally from Canada, living at the Baylor School as a boarding school member. And if you look at his highlights, he's explosive. He is a good football player. And I am curious to see how Ole Miss will use him. I am curious to see if what Ole Miss will do as far as the other running backs in this class. We've talked to Zach Berry, who has mentioned Jamarian Morrow. He's a commit to Missouri. Currently, he's somebody to pay attention to. He is out of Memphis. And, of course, a Kylan Deere. He posted a picture just yesterday of his Dandy Dozen graphic from Ole Miss wearing an Ole Miss uniform. I do not think that door is completely closed either. But Shakai Mills-Knight is an excellent start to the recruiting cycle for Ole Miss. We do not know exactly how this will end. We are just starting to see this go through the ending process. And remember, when it comes to recruits, now pay attention to the visits. Really pay attention to the visits. You're not going to get a player if he's not coming to your campus for a game. You're just not. I do not care if it's Deuce Knight, Caleb Cunningham, or anybody. If they're not coming to your campus at least once for a game, you're probably not getting that player. If he is somewhere else all the time, that is probably where he is going to end up. So we will see. We are a couple of weeks away from college football kicking off in earnest with Florida State and Georgia Tech from Dublin, Ireland on August 24th. That's like less than 2 weeks away, honestly. That is really cool stuff. But this has been a really good podcast and a really fun podcast. You've been able to tell by the tone of my voice. And the Tre Harris most improved shows the hunger of the athletes. Ole Miss having the reminder of what 1970 is, that is important to fight off the rat poison that is always coming down on this Ole Miss football team. And Ole Miss potentially landing their game-changing running back, that is good news as well. Thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. And we thank you for that. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Football Podcast with Spencer McLaughlin. He will get you hyped up for an exciting season with in-depth discussions on important games and the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics, from conference realignment to the transfer portal to NIL updates and the new college football playoff. Spencer covers it all. You can find Locked On College Football on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, exciting news. You can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's a texting program that sends you notifications on everything relevant, all without the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. We're constantly adding new perks as we grow, and so don't miss out. The link is in the description down below. And for those watching on YouTube, we will send you to Locked On College Sports right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.